They threw me out. After 17 years, I took down the whole company. 17 years. That's how long I had given to my company. 17 years of cancelled vacations, late nights, missed birthdays, and weekends sacrificed just to keep the systems running. And then, on an ordinary Monday morning, everything vanished in less than 60 seconds. My boss looked me dead in the eyes and said, flatly, Jake, after 17 years, we're eliminating your position. Clean out your desk by the end of the day. No handshake. No thank you for your service. Just a cold corporate execution delivered like a line from a manual. I nodded once. I didn't beg. I didn't get angry. I simply walked out. Because what they didn't know was that for months, I had been quietly watching. I had been documenting. I had been storing away truths that could destroy careers. This isn't just a story about being fired. It's a story about betrayal, about loyalty turned to dust, and about how the quietest person in the room can become the most dangerous. I started at Meridian Technologies back when it was barely a footnote in the IT world. Just 2 rented floors in an office park in Columbus, Ohio. The carpet was worn. The break room smelled of burnt coffee. And the servers downstairs sounded like a jet engine. Back then, I wasn't chasing glory. I was chasing stability. My daughter was starting kindergarten. My wife just wanted me to come home at a decent hour. I thought Meridian would be a place where I could plant roots. On my first day, I looked at the spaghetti mess of network cables and the blinking server lights and thought, yes, this is where I belong. For the next 17 years, I wasn't the loudest voice in meetings. I didn't care about promotions or fancy titles. I was the guy who kept things running. When a system crashed at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I was there. When a new CEO needed a crash course in our infrastructure, I was the one explaining when young hires drowned in legacy code. I guided them patiently. In every company, there are people like this, silent pillars holding everything up. They don't demand recognition, they don't show off, but without them, the entire structure would collapse. The tragedy is, those pillars are often the first to be taken for granted and the first to be demolished when leadership wants change. The downfall didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It seeped in quietly, drop by drop, so that at first I barely noticed. The first hint was a small change in my access permissions. Just a missing log file here, a locked folder there. Easy to dismiss as a new security policy. But then more access vanished. Then came the meetings. For years, I'd been in every major conversation about upgrades and security. Suddenly, I wasn't invited. Emails came and went without my name. Projects I'd normally lead were handed to younger analysts. And then came Jason Phillips. Jason was everything upper management drools over tall. Polished Ivy League MBA, handshake firm enough to bruise within weeks. He was everywhere, whispering in conference rooms, standing at my boss Daniel's side, throwing around terms like future-proofing and digital transformation. And me, I was being treated like an antique filing cabinet. This is how companies often push out veterans. They don't fire you outright. They erode you slowly. They take away access. They remove you from decisions. They give your projects to others. It's death by 1,000 cuts. But here's the thing, I wasn't obsolete. I wasn't irrelevant. And I knew exactly what was happening. So I chose silence, not out of fear, but out of strategy. I watched, I recorded, I waited. That Monday, Daniel called me into his office. Sitting beside him was Vanessa from HR. Jake, Daniel said, his voice flat. After 17 years, we're eliminating your position. Please clear your desk by end of day. He might as well have been reading a weather report. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming. But knowing doesn't soften the blow. I nodded, stood, and began to pack my things, the coffee mug my son made me in high school pottery class, the family photo that sat beside my monitor, the small cactus that had somehow survived 17 years of fluorescent light. Co-workers glanced at me, then quickly back at their screens. No one wanted to be associated with the man being erased. Only Bethany from marketing came over, her eyes wide with outrage. "Jake, this is insane. You practically built this place." I gave her a small smile. Companies change direction. When I walked out, Daniel stood in the hallway, arms folded, watching to make sure I actually left. No handshake, no farewell, just surveillance. In that moment, I understood something brutal to them. I wasn't a human being. I was a budget line, a number to erase. 17 years of loyalty meant nothing, but what they didn't know was that I had been preparing. I held a secret one that could bring everything crashing down. Most people, when they lose their job, go home, pour a drink, and spiral. But I didn't. Why? Because I already knew why they wanted me gone. Months earlier, while running a routine security scan, I stumbled across something odd in the financial systems. A series of transfers to a vendor I didn't recognize, Apex Solutions Group. At first, it was small, just a few $1,000s here and there. But then the payments started growing, tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Curious, I dug deeper. Apex had been incorporated less than a year earlier. Its registered address, a UPS mailbox. It had no real office, no employees, no track record. And yet, our company was funneling money into it every single month. I checked the business owner. His name, Thomas Wilcox. That name rang a bell. A quick social media search confirmed it. He was the brother-in-law of Brian Wilcox, our CFO. That was the moment the puzzle clicked into place. These weren't just payments. They were siphons. Small overcharges disguised as software license renewals. Nothing so big it would trigger automatic audits. Just 10% here, 20% there. But across a massive corporate IT budget, that added up to millions. And I was the only one who saw it. This is how fraud often works in corporations. It doesn't usually start with a giant embezzlement. That would be too obvious. It starts small, subtle, blended into normal operations. Think of the case of Enron before it collapsed in 2001. Its fraud was buried in complex accounting tricks that looked like normal business on paper. Or think about mid-sized firms caught paying consultants who turned out to be relatives of executives. It's rarely one smoking gun. It's a pattern of smoke so thin most people don't notice. But if you're the kind of person who loves logs, audits, and records like you see it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. I had another advantage. I had been keeping records for years. Most employees trust that IT systems will log everything, but I knew better. Logs get deleted, permissions change, backups fail. So years ago, during a corporate scandal when the legal team needed forensic data, I built a parallel audit system. It tracked who accessed what, when permissions were changed, and where sensitive data moved. And because I didn't trust the company to keep it safe, I kept off-site copies. Technically, that was against company policy. But I had gotten it signed off back when they needed me to set up insider threat protections. Once the crisis passed, everyone forgot about it. Everyone except me. So when I saw the Apex payments, I didn't just note them, I copied every invoice, every approval, every email chain. I had a paper trail stretching back 18 months, showing how millions were being siphoned out of Meridian Technologies right under management's nose. And when they fired me, I walked away calm because I knew I had the real leverage. Let me pause here to make an important point. Most people, when betrayed by their company, would lash out immediately. They'd storm HR, call the news, post on LinkedIn about being wronged. And maybe that gives a moment of satisfaction, but it almost never works. If I had gone public the day I was fired, it would have looked like sour grapes. A bitter old employee making wild accusations. They would have buried me under legal threats before anyone took me seriously. So I didn't react with rage. I reacted with strategy. Step 1, gather airtight evidence. Step 2, choose the right time to strike. Step 3, make sure the exposure couldn't be spun, silenced, or erased. That meant patience. Cold, focused patience. There's a famous whistleblower case from the 2000s, Sharon Watkins at Enron. She discovered irregularities but didn't rush to the media. She carefully compiled memos, laid out facts, and presented them internally. When the scandal finally broke, her documentation made it impossible for executives to deny the fraud. That's the key difference. Anger makes noise, but documentation makes impact, and I knew which one I was going to rely on. The morning after I was fired, I woke up later than usual. No alarm, no commute, just silence. Andrea, my wife, placed a cup of coffee next to me. She didn't ask questions. After nearly 20 years of marriage, she knew when to give me space. Once she left for errands, I went to my desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out my flash drive. On it was a treasure chest of secrets invoices, approval logs, private emails, financial reports, all showing how money was being siphoned through Apex Solutions Group. I cross-checked dates, compared amounts, and realized something even bigger. This wasn't just a recent scheme. There was a second shell company, Lakeside Business Solutions, set up 3 years earlier. Different name, same scam. This one was tied to Patricia Wilcox, the CFO's wife. That meant the fraud had been running for years, not months. And the total wasn't a couple million, it was over 4 million stolen. And now, I was holding the proof. I knew I couldn't just send the report to the board and hope for the best. I had to test how deeply my boss Daniel and CFO Brian were involved. So, on Wednesday morning, just as the quarterly board meeting was about to start, I sent a carefully worded email to Daniel. Subject line: financial irregularities, urgent review. I laid out a short summary of the Apex payments. Not too much, just enough detail to make him realize someone had noticed. By 9:45 a.m., my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. By 10:30, I had an email from HR warning me to stop contacting employees. By noon, Brian, the CFO himself, called me personally. His voice calm but tense. Jake, let's talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding. We can work something out. Translation: we'll pay you off if you shut up. But I wasn't interested in hush money. I was interested in justice. Think about that moment. I was unemployed. I had no income, no safety net beyond savings. And here was the CFO of a multi-million-dollar company offering me a way out severance, references, maybe even a lump sum. Most people would have taken it. And honestly, I don't blame them. Whistleblowing can destroy your career, but I couldn't, because once you've seen corruption that deep, walking away makes you complicit. And I wasn't going to let them erase me and keep their stolen millions. Still, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone inside the system with enough credibility to take me seriously. That's when I thought of Robert Chen. Robert was a semi-retired board member who had been around since Meridian's early days. I had worked with him years ago on a security project. Unlike most executives, he actually read audit reports and asked hard questions. So, I called him. We met in a quiet park a few miles from headquarters. I handed him a sealed envelope, a printed summary, and a flash drive with the full evidence. I'm not asking for my job back, I told him. I just want the truth to be known. Robert skimmed the documents, then looked at me, his expression grave. Jake, this is going to burn the house down. Good, I replied, with Robert on board. I knew I had a path forward, but I also knew the timing had to be perfect. If I revealed everything at the wrong moment, Daniel and Brian could scramble to cover their tracks. But if I waited until a critical meeting when financial reports were on the agenda and the whole board was watching, there would be no hiding. So I scheduled it. Friday morning, that was the day executive bonuses were set to be approved, the day when financial scrutiny was highest, and that was when I dropped the hammer. Looking back, those 3 days after being fired were some of the strangest in my life. On the surface, I was just another middle-aged man suddenly unemployed. But beneath that calm exterior, I was preparing a strike that could topple careers, expose corruption, and maybe even put people in prison. And the best part, they had no idea. Friday morning arrived crisp and cold. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't wake up to an alarm, didn't put on a badge, didn't commute to the office. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring at my laptop. At exactly 8:00 a.m., I executed the plan. I had drafted an email from a secure account I'd created years ago for penetration testing, an account designed to look like it came from inside Meridian's network, but invisible to their monitoring. Attached was my full report invoices, approvals, company registrations, cross-referenced timelines, a meticulous trail of how millions had been siphoned out through Apex and Lakeside. The subject line was simple: before you approve Q2 bonuses. Read this. And then, with a single click, I sent it to every member of the board. For the first time all week, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and smiled. The die was cast. The response was quicker than I imagined. By 8:17 a.m., my phone started buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Board members, lawyers. By 9:00 a.m., Daniel called again, his voice tight in the voicemail he left Jake. "We need to talk about what you've done. Call me back immediately." By 10:00 a.m., Meridian's general counsel reached me directly. "Mr. Wilson, we need you to come in right away to discuss the materials you've provided." I answered calmly, "No, everything I know is already in that report, and it's backed up in multiple locations. If anything happens to me, it will be released to regulators and the press." There was silence on the line, then a strained voice. "Understood." Inside Meridian's headquarters, chaos was erupting. Executives who had strutted confidently into the boardroom an hour earlier were now pale, whispering frantically, papers flying across the table. Daniel tried to insist the documents were fake. Brian, the CFO, stayed unusually quiet, sweating, tugging at his collar. Jason Phillips, the consultant who had replaced me, attempted to distance himself immediately. I was brought in for modernization, not finances. I had no idea about any irregularities, but the documents told a different story. Email chains with his name on them, unusual procurement approvals he had signed. His fingerprints were all over it, whether he liked it or not. And Robert Chen, the board member I trusted, confirmed the obvious: the evidence was too detailed, too precise, to be fabricated. Here's the thing about whistleblowing: timing is everything. If I had sent my evidence on a random Tuesday, it might have been buried or dismissed, but by sending it right before executive bonuses were to be approved, I forced the board to act. They couldn't ignore it. They couldn't delay. Millions were on the table, and suddenly, every dollar was tainted by suspicion. This is a tactic anyone facing corruption should understand. Don't just reveal the truth, reveal it when ignoring it is impossible. By early afternoon, whispers had leaked beyond the boardroom. At 2:00 p.m., the first headline appeared on a local business site: Meridian Technologies facing questions over financial irregularities. No names yet, just sources close to the matter, but the damage was done. Employees started texting me. A junior analyst I'd mentored wrote, "Jake, everyone's freaking out. Phillips called an emergency meeting. They're saying you sent some insane email about fraud. What's happening?" I replied with just 2 words: "Just watch." By 5:00 p.m., word reached me from Robert, the CFO. Brian Wilcox had cracked under pressure, faced with the evidence. He confessed but tried to spin it as if Daniel had pressured him, that he was a reluctant participant. It was a desperate move, an attempt to cut a deal before things escalated to law enforcement. But his confession only confirmed what my documents already proved: the fraud was real. This is another pattern you see often in corporate scandals. At first, everyone denies. Then, as soon as one person realizes the evidence is airtight, they flip. They blame someone else, claim they were coerced, anything to reduce their own punishment. Think of Volkswagen's emissions scandal. Engineers initially denied wrongdoing, then slowly began admitting it under investigation, pointing fingers at executives. Or WorldCom in the early 2000s, when lower-level accountants started cooperating. Revealing the fraud ran to the top. Corruption rarely collapses all at once. It crumbles piece by piece as fear overtakes loyalty. And then there was Jason Phillips, the shiny consultant who had been brought in to replace me. When the evidence tied his approvals to questionable vendor payments, he panicked by the weekend. Word spread that Jason had left the country on a business trip. In reality, he was running, but you can't outrun paper trails. Procurement systems don't care about your suit or your MBA. And eventually, even across borders, extradition treaties catch up. That Friday evening, I sat on my porch with Andrea. We watched the sun dip below the horizon. "Do you feel happy?" she asked gently. I thought about it, about the years of loyalty, the betrayal, the quiet rage, about the chaos now unfolding inside a company I had given half my life to. Happiness isn't the word, I said. It's more like satisfaction, completion. Because this wasn't just revenge, this was balance. Over the next few weeks, the fallout only grew. Brian Wilcox, the CFO, formally resigned and faced criminal charges for embezzlement. Daniel, my boss, was suspended pending investigation, loudly protesting his innocence even as emails proved otherwise. Jason Phillips, tracked down overseas, was forced to return and face questioning. Meridian's reputation tanked, stock prices dipping as the news spread. And in the middle of it all, I stayed silent, watching, waiting, knowing the truth had finally come to light. I won't sugarcoat it. Doing what I did comes at a cost. Whistleblowers often become unemployable in their industry. They're seen as troublemakers, even when they save a company millions or expose fraud. Future employers worry they'll do the same again. That's why so many people stay silent. They weigh their career against the truth and decide silence is safer. But sometimes, silence is complicity. And I couldn't carry that weight. Then came the twist I never expected. Weeks after the scandal broke, I received a call not from HR, not from Daniel, not from lawyers. From the board itself. They wanted me back. Not as a systems analyst, not even as a manager, but as a watchdog. They offered me a new role: direct oversight of IT and financial security. Reporting directly to the board, independent authority, audit powers. It was everything I'd never asked for, but everything the company now desperately needed. That offer forced me to confront a question I hadn't considered. Did I even want to go back? The company had betrayed me, discarded me like trash after 17 years, but now they wanted me to be the one to safeguard them from corruption. Could I walk back into the same halls where I'd been humiliated, or would I take satisfaction in knowing I'd already won and move on? The day I walked back into Meridian's headquarters, it felt surreal. The same building where I'd been escorted out weeks earlier, carrying a box of personal items, now welcomed me back with a visitor badge. The security guard who once barely nodded at me now greeted me with respect. "Good to see you again, Mr. Wilson." The elevator ride to the executive floor was quiet. I'd never needed to visit this floor before. I was always buried in the server rooms, in the trenches. But now I was expected in the boardroom. When I walked in, 10 board members sat around a polished oak table. The interim CEO, promoted from COO, looked uncomfortable. Robert Chen gave me a small nod of encouragement. "Jake," the interim CEO began, "we'd like to offer you the role of Chief Security and Audit Officer, full oversight across IT and financial systems. You'd report directly to us. We need someone we can trust." I set a folder on the table. Inside were my conditions: independent authority, audit rights across all departments, the power to veto any questionable financial technology decision. The CEO's eyebrows rose. "This is unusual." I met her gaze. "So was embezzling $5.2 million. This happened because no one was watching. That ends now." The board exchanged glances, then slowly nodded. For the first time in my career, I wasn't the quiet man in the basement. I was the watchdog at the top. Over the next months, the consequences unfolded. Brian Wilcox, the CFO, pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud. He agreed to a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation, but he still faced years in prison. Daniel, my boss, tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was indicted. His career over. Jason Phillips, the consultant who had run overseas, was extradited back and faced charges of aiding in procurement fraud. His polished MBA sheen couldn't protect him anymore. The money siphoned through Apex and Lakeside was mostly recovered enough to stabilize Meridian, though the reputational damage lingered. And me, I spent long days combing through years of systems, plugging holes, building safeguards. For once, I had the authority to stop corruption before it started. Here's the strange part about revenge or justice. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't feel like some triumphant movie ending where violins play and confetti falls. For me, it felt like quiet relief, a kind of stillness. The anger that had burned in me the day I was fired slowly faded. What remained wasn't joy, it was completion. I had been betrayed, but I had turned that betrayal into leverage. And in doing so, I had proven that the quiet, overlooked man could bring down giants. One evening, months after the dust settled, Andrea and I went out to dinner. It was simple, just a local restaurant we liked. As we walked out, she squeezed my hand. So, are you happy now? I thought about it. About the 17 years I'd given, about the humiliation of being discarded, about the weeks of stress, plotting, waiting, about the chaos that followed. I don't know if happy is the right word, I said finally, but I'm at peace, and that's enough. She smiled softly. Then it was worth it. Looking back, here's what I want anyone watching this to take away. Document everything. Keep records, emails, approvals, logs. Even when things seem fine, create your own archive. Because one day, it may be the only thing standing between truth and silence. Pay attention to subtle signs, losing access, being excluded from meetings, reassigned projects. These aren't just politics. Sometimes, they're the writing on the wall. Don't react with rage. React with strategy. Fury feels good in the moment but gets dismissed as bitterness. Evidence, delivered at the right time, is impossible to ignore. Find allies. Even in corrupt systems, there are people who care. Identify them. Trust them. They can amplify your voice when it matters. Loyalty must be mutual. Never forget a company isn't a family if your loyalty isn't reciprocated. Protect yourself. Invest in your own safety net. My story echoes countless others. People like Cynthia Cooper at WorldCom, who uncovered $3.8 billion in fraud, or Harry Markopolos, who tried to warn regulators about Bernie Madoff years before his Ponzi scheme collapsed. They weren't rewarded with parades. Many of them were ostracized, sidelined, or even blacklisted. Because telling the truth is dangerous in systems built on lies, but they chose integrity over silence. And in the end, so did I. Today, Meridian is a different company. Tighter controls, transparent audits, a board that actually listens. I'm still there, though not forever. One day, I'll retire for good, knowing I left the place stronger than I found it. But my real legacy isn't a title or a paycheck. It's the reminder that the overlooked worker, the quiet observer, the outdated employee can be the one who saves an entire company. So yes, I was fired after 17 years with no warning, but I wasn't powerless. And if you're watching this right now, maybe you felt something similar. Maybe you've been sidelined, ignored, or treated like you no longer matter. Remember this, you may not be able to control the betrayal, but you can control how you respond. Be observant. Be strategic. Protect yourself, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything.